Right, so the ongoing attacks on Syria by Israel, the ongoing expansionism, as I've spoken about in a few videos now, this all smacks of the greater Israel ideology being meted out, either intentionally or simply to keep more warfare going on in order to keep Benjamin Netanyahu in place as Prime Minister, by keeping his far-right coalition allies happy as they seize more territory. And certainly the seizure of chunks of Gaza now since the ceasefire collapse there bear that out as well, with Rafah having been effectively wiped off the map and a new security corridor being built to annex what was once Rafah for Israeli control. With Syria, though, we've seen Israel push on through the south of the country, south of Damascus, barring the HTS-led self-imposed government from the area, warning their pro-Israel unelected President Ahmed Al Sharaa to leave them be or else, and yet they continue to make way, seizing more territory as they go. If you listen to the likes of the fanatically far-right Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, it's all about expanding as far as Damascus itself. But plans that have surfaced imply Israeli plans go much further than that, and their chosen course through Syria and their ultimate goal in doing so might have just become clear. Right, so Israel has been pursuing increasing territorial expansion under the guise of security ever since they began their genocide of Gaza following the events of October 7th. But actually this isn't when it began at all, merely when it suddenly increased. From the occupation of Palestine to the annexation of the Golan Heights in 1967, Israel has always been a territory-seizing, expansionist entity, and all the illegal settlements that have been popping up in the intervening years across the West Bank and in Gaza before those settlements were pulled down again has borne that out. Since October 7th, though, we've seen what happened in Gaza, and we've seen the increase in settlements being authorised for construction and the destruction of Palestinian homes in the West Bank. And we've also seen the invasion of southern Lebanon and Israel's refusal to leave. And we've seen the civil war in Syria witness the fall of the Assad regime to HTS and Israel's immediate invasion of Syria thereafter, with the new de facto President Al Sharaa incessantly claiming to be Israel's ally even though they're invading him. Well, the thing is, we know Israel has been aiding HTS for years, leading up to Assad's fall, passing along aid, supplies, medicine, etc. But the moment these Al-Qaeda leftovers won, Israel seemingly dropped them like a rock. Why? What was their plan? Well, details might now have emerged about that finally. That there is an end goal here. It defies logic, it is utterly insane, and a threat to world peace as well. But it is nonetheless a plan of a sort. Israel does like to divide and conquer, so to speak. It loves to build security corridors. And we've seen one such corridor built across the middle of Gaza, haven't we? The Netzarim corridor. Another is now being built, as aforementioned, to cut off Rafah from the rest of Gaza, what used to be Rafah. So building one across Syria is par for the course, therefore. David's corridor, as this one is called, not actually a new idea at all, but an old one resurrected by a government that might just be mad enough to try and carry it out, is a land bridge that would stretch from the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights through southern Syria, linking up with US-backed Kurdish forces in the north of the country. This scheme, if successful, would effectively therefore partition Syria, cementing Israeli control over strategic territory whilst further destabilising the entire Levant region. The implications of it, frankly, are staggering. Israel's exploiting Syria's weakness post-civil war for its own ends here, along with the ridiculous stance of Al Sharaa, stoking further Turkish-Kurdish tensions as well as placing itself on a collision course for direct conflict with Turkey, and expanding its control over territory in the Middle East with another phase of its Greater Israel project being implemented. So let's start with David's Corridor then. David's Corridor is a long-term Israeli idea aimed at creating a permanent land connection between Israel and the US-protected Kurdish enclaves in northern Syria. The corridor would begin in the illegally occupied Golan Heights, annexed as they were by Israel in 1967, but the borders of which have been expanded since, taking in large parts of the southern Syrian governorates of Quneitra and Dara and encroaching on the Druze settlements beyond that, all part of the route for David's Corridor as these are. Beyond this, it would cut through southern Syria even further, where Israel has been conducting frequent airstrikes and establishing further military footholds, linking up with the US-controlled southern military base of Tamph on the Jordanian border, before finally swinging northwards, taking the corridor through ISIS-controlled territory in central Syria, before finally reaching the Kurdish US areas of Syria, and crucially Syria's oil fields, which would no doubt then be ripe for Israel to access. Damascus would effectively then be partitioned off completely from its border with Jordan, as well as completely from its own oil fields, and Al Sharaa is still sitting on his hands, it seems. It would also place an Israeli-controlled barrier between Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. So what are the benefits to Israel by doing this then? Apart from the oil, obviously. Well, it would permanently weaken and destabilise Syria, splitting the country in half, impoverishing both halves as it would. It completely destabilises both bits as it would. Syria wants its oil back. Under this plan, Israel would gain access to that. It would strengthen ties with the US allied Kurds, who are fighting Turkey, and could aid Israel in acting as a buffer zone between Turkey and Iran, and also Iraq, for that matter, who I'm sure do not want Israel on their border at all. You wonder how their armed forces and the local militias there, such as the Popular Mobilization Front, would take all of this news. Not very well, I would imagine. It would also undoubtedly place Israel and Turkey at war with each other at this point. Turkey wants to strengthen ties with Syria, and here is Israel destabilising everything they're working for and siding with their Kurdish enemies in the north potentially. Israel could afford it, though, if they reach Syria's oil fields. They won't need oil piped via Turkey from Azerbaijan any longer. More fool Turkey President Erdogan for not cutting that supply off to Israel earlier, but he is a fool. This move would also cut Damascus off from a significant chunk of its own water supply. That's all in the south, leaving them with very little leverage to fight back with water shortages. It would also account for some 40% of Jordan's water supply as well. Not that Jordan ever seemed too keen to rock the boat ever, even as Israel increasingly surrounds them. Now you might be thinking, Damo, this is surely heavily speculative. But it really isn't, because this is the path Israel is charting through Syria. And this is a plan that has been floated about for decades. Israeli officials have hinted at this plan for years, and their military actions in southern Syria align perfectly with its implementation. Right now, Israel is moving aggressively through Syria to solidify its grip on the territory it is seizing, exploiting the chaos of Syria's post-war weakness and international apathy to ever stop Israel doing whatever it likes, though it certainly doesn't help that Syria's de facto government aren't either. We have, after all, seen escalated airstrikes under false pretenses by Israel on Syria, striking Damascus itself, striking supposed military caches and other installations, striking at civilian areas, striking as warnings to Syria to not mess with Israel, to not dare to stop them. But Syria itself may fall completely, unable to sustain itself, if Israel is allowed to partition the country, as seems to very much be the current goal. Israel claims its frequent bombings are in the name of Israeli security, yet most strikes hit Syrian military positions and civilian infrastructure. And really what is happening is intimidation and attrition as they expand further eastwards. Just last month, Israel launched one of its largest strikes in years, hitting both Aleppo and Damascus. Ahmed Al Sharaa has not lifted a finger to strike Israel back even now. So these attacks are utterly unjustified, yet still happen again and again and again, because Israel fears no repercussions. Everyone, including Al Sharaa, it seems, just shrugged their shoulders, but it is all intimidation to allow for further expansionism and keep building that corridor. Sure, Syria's foreign ministry condemned the attacks each time they happen, but that's it. There's never any military retaliation, never any defence of the people they claim to serve, just strong words. But like so many Western nations appear to put Israel first still. Just par for the course. Along with the ongoing progression eastwards, though, Israeli forces are digging in as they go. There are increased patrols in southern Syria, especially near the Golan Heights, but also in the territory they've already seized control over. They've already built outposts there. They've even got roads connecting them to Israel. In fact, so brazen are Israel and so comfortable and content in the areas they've illegally seized and annexed in southern Syria, they are now even conducting hiking tours for Jewish settlers in occupied Syrian territory. They've opened the area up to tourism already. Where all of this is going their way, though, one obstacle they seem destined to now have a collision course with will be with Turkey. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, allied to the US, who are obviously also allied to, as the US is to Israel's plan, in dealing with this obstacle. By aligning with the Kurds, therefore, Israel gain a friendly northern terminus for David's corridor, conveniently with access to that oil of Syria's, as well as additional support forces against Turkey, who view Kurdish autonomy as an existential threat to them. Turkey has already warned Israel, calling it the biggest threat to regional peace. Well, perhaps you should have cut their oil off already. Turn their lights out. You're still supplying Israel with oil. Turkey's position with Israel has been one of utter hypocrisy. So do something about it. A direct clash between Turkish and Israeli forces in Syria is now a real possibility, even a likelihood now that these plans have been exposed. Turkey will not tolerate a permanent Israeli-Kurdish corridor, though. This is the weak link, aside from anything that Iraq or Iran or the Syrian government, if they ever wake up to themselves, could do. Ankara sees Kurdish autonomy as a red line, and if Israel entrenches itself in northern Syria, they would offer this by way of alliance. War with Turkey then becomes inevitable. But then Israel would quite like a chunk of Turkey too. It's on their Greater Israel plan as well, after all. The US gets on with Turkey right now, but in a choice between them and Israel, heck, they'd probably side with Israel against any number of their own states, let alone anyone else. At the end of the day, David's Corridor is not just another military operation. It is a deliberate, long-term plan to redraw the Middle East map in Israel's favour. If successful, it will permanently fracture Syria, dooming any hope of reunification, all land for the taking at a later date, I dare say, as what's left of the Syrian nation crumbles. It would escalate tensions with Turkey as well, risking an even broader war in the Middle East, and it would further embolden and entrench Israeli expansionism, proving that aggression pays as nobody holds them to account. If this plan succeeds, Syria will cease to exist as a unified state, and Israel's Greater Israel project will take another step forward. Remember, we all talk about Israel's right to exist. Well, what about Syria's then? Because it looks like it's on the line. And then where do Israel go after that? Jordan? Egypt? They're all on the plan, the Greater Israel plan. They're all part of it. At what point does the world step in to stop Israel? Actually, meaningfully do something to stop them? Meanwhile, Israeli expansionism might have taken a bit of a sideways slant. Not so much the expansion of the current Israel, but the creation of a second one. A new dumping ground for the population of Gaza. Israel 2.0, if you will. Get all the details of that plan in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't already done so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as help support the channel, which is enormously appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.